Hey everyone, and welcome back on the Performance Podcast. Today we have two incredible guests with us, both co authors of India's very first sports psychology anthology, Minds in Motion. And it's my greatest pleasure to welcome Dr. Chaitanya and Keerthana, our very own Keerthana, on stage with us. Just to start off with, my first question is both of you have had a very unique journey in sports psych so far. So, what kind of experiences do you bring to the table when you thought about bringing this book, uh, to life?
Um, First of all, thank you for having me here, and it's really nice to be with you all. When we came together, was there was a lot of sensationalizing which was happening with psychology in a very negative way. And I remember the n number of times Keerthana and me would keep having these conversations. And while some of us are put on a pedestal, it was still that, oh, Indian athletes don't have that mindset, or there's they're choking at the end minute. But as an ecosystem, they weren't being held and supported, and it was very distressing, just to bring in what happened, especially during Paris. So I was in the midst of my first book, throngs of my first book, and it was one of these such nuances which kept happening, such incidents. And then I messaged Keerthana, going, we really should, we should think about bringing something. And I think that's what the field, as a depth psychologist, I think that's what the field was asking. That was what Indian sport and sports psychology was asking. And we were on the same page with that. So I think amidst the gamut of things, somehow we managed to actually, I think it was the vision of really aiding Indian sport, honestly, and sports psychology really needed a direction.
That's a very beautiful way to put it. Keerthana, do you have?
So, um, so again, in the last 10 years, sports psych has changed quite a bit, right? So, initially we used to say it's in nascent stages, but here I think today we are in a developing stage. And it's very, I want to say the word dangerous because during COVID, um, you know, sports psych was very glamorized and sensationalized as well, and because of which there were a lot of misconceptions about sports psychologists, right? So meaning more people wanted to take a sports psych's help, but they didn't know for what reason. And we wanted to make sure that the myths are broken, the misconceptions are broken. And even aspiring sports psychologists, especially with inspa, I got to understand that many of the aspiring sports psychologists assume that the first job you're going to land is an IPL job, right? And or that's the most glamorous place to work, or that's where you're going to make that's the place you're going to yeah, make it big, or actually put use of all the skills that we worked and things like that. So just all of this put together, and I think the timing was just right. I already had written my first book few years ago, so for me, I anyway wanted to write something, but this was just a perfect timing in that sense, and everything came together, and that's how it all started. For us, the main focus was that shift in narrative. We wanted that the book to be the beginning of a journey, and the way people look at sports psych should be different.
Yeah, really to make it a movement.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I get that aspect about how everyone thinks that their first job they're going to land is IPL. And funnily, I've seen so many people look at sports psych within a team environment as an area of wellness rather than performance. And also talking about where, you're talking about how dangerous it is right now and sports safety. And with Keerthana, a lot of your research being in, safe sport. What do you think that looks like for an athlete right now?
Um, I think we were just discussing this morning. We live in a VUCA world, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? And that's become our normal right now. There is danger everywhere. But that's not the danger that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the danger of not feeling safe, not even physical, but just being in a state where you constantly feel threatened. Okay. And sometimes that happens quite a bit, especially for an athlete, around their own parents. Sometimes funnily it happens with their coaches. And I say funnily because, that's the space they are supposed to be in 24/7. That's the space, you have to trust. And, they are the catalyst, right? They are the ladder. And that feeling needs to be there, that safety, but that is definitely not what they're feeling. And even generally with the management or things like that, mostly athletes feel threatened. And when you feel threatened, performance is definitely not something that uh, you can look at. The way you respond to stressful situations is going to be a lot less. uh, it's definitely not going to be performance oriented. So that is something that I constantly want to bring up. And again, like, with the book, if I have to integrate that with the book as well, um, there is a section where we speak about practitioners and how important it is for practitioners to work on themselves, because again, the way we show up uh, is very important for the athlete as well. So I think that's where the entire safety picture comes in. Yes.
And talking a little more about safety and wellness and IPL, Doc, you started with IPL in 2020, which was peak COVID. So, pulling out from experiences from there, what was it like with this whole misconception, and what was your key takeaways for women in sport, especially?
So I actually started with IPL in 2019. So I mean, kudos to RCB for that. I was on board with them after the debacle of 2019 actually, and so the work had started much earlier. And I think what was very important was I worked largely with the leadership group. So it was the head of ops, head coach, and the then captain was Virat, of course. We really, tying to what Keerthana was saying was, we were in a constant state of kya hoga, what's happening. People are like, COVID's near my house, my neighbors got it, my friend's sons got it, etc., right? And and I was not with the women, I was with the men's team. So I was practically the only female. Of course, there was one other person, but I think what can also come is I have to hold myself before I can go and support, whether that's an athlete, whether that's a team. And one of my favorite quotes is by Dr. Stephen Porges, who says, safety is not the absence of threat, safety is the presence of connection. So if we are not connected, and you look at a high performing team or you look at any team, right? If there's no connection, any team, even those we work with, is when there's going to be, I'm not doing this, there's going to be burnout, there's going to be, and you're looking at a COVID time, right? So, and I think for me also, what was most heartening that time was the number of sports psychs in particular, like I saw posts of how proud and this set the pace. And honestly, I think more than me going into that, I think just what it opened for sports psychologists, and especially because when they approached me, I was like, why me? It's a men's team, why? Like I was in a state of denial and shock, but they kept coming back, and it honestly was a very good experience, except that of course we were in a very very stressful time. It was in a COVID bio bubble. It was in Dubai. I'm like, I want to go back home and die if I have to die. That's my thought in my head. I'm like, I don't want to fall sick or be in something in Dubai. But I think the team really came together because you couldn't go out, and I think that's where I really worked with, let's keep them updated, because we didn't know how long, when we're going to open, what's going to happen. So I feel that way I learned, and I think that's also where I'm like, and also I asked for what's the support I need as an introvert, and I need my space. And in a setup like IPL, right, there's a lot of things which are happening. So to also get very clear with what works for me and how can I best aid the team and the individual. So that was my biggest takeaway.
And again, pulling from that, there's a lot of resilience required in such an environment. And to know that you've actually done that kind of work with elephants, I mean, trans species, your previous book highlights that a lot. How was that as an experience, and what was your takeaways from that?
From the book,
From the
the
experience of
elephants.
working with elephants?
That question can go on the entire day, but I'll keep it really short. I think, it was just around the time that I was getting into IPL was when the Elephants came into my life, or I think they'd just come in earlier. I would really say what it really opened in me was that sense of integration and vulnerability, which we so cut off sports from. It's such a I can do it, macho, come on, chin up. But it's those quiet moments for us which really like brings that spark, because an athlete finally smiles, finally gets on the mat, gets a medal, yes, of course. And I think for me, when I could start integrating, Harini, the two worlds, because initially I kept it aside, and it was incidentally, it was also with the IPL team itself, with them in itself, that I actually started bringing, and just the way the management and the players open. Because it was almost like there was this one time, I can't give out too much details, but it was a session where, I was explaining a emergence concept, and, there was this photo of me with my two lovely elephants, and we were incidentally in a circle, and the look on the player's face was like, okay, if she can handle elephants, she can surely handle us. Because you have the who's who, you have a Virat, you have an ABD, and then you have the younger ones. I think to also bring all the worlds together. So for me, it's really been a one question of integration, and the instinct. Very honestly, I think which sometimes goes off the radar in sports. They get so much here. So yeah, it's been a very, very beautiful journey. Thank you for asking that.
Yes, I actually want to pick your brain a lot about that a little later.
Yes.
And again, dragging from that is where uh, we spoke about how each of these players have their own aspect to bring in. And within India, a country which is so culturally diverse, so Keerthana, what kind of complexities do you think that diversity in culture is bringing to sports psychology?
Um, actually, I think first of all, diversity is actually a very, very nice thing. But I love how you put the complexity portion over there. I think in general, we need to be very inclusive in nature. Okay, because the moment we are inclusive and don't get our opinions involved with what the athlete brings in, life becomes so much simpler, and there are no again, for the lack of better words, boundaries in that sense. Okay, so that is in terms of how we would handle things, right? But also to bring in the athlete's culture to practice. Again, if there are some athletes who would prefer to be religious, be spiritual, and I'm using both the words separately because it can be separate as well, and that can work for them. Why not? So it's just about looking at what works for the athlete and being very like open and inclusive. Just being inclusive, again, whether you're working with a para athlete, again, that's a different realm of diversity in that sense, right? Again, LGBTQ, right? These are things we actually speak about. There is education for that, right? But there is not much education in terms of religious diversities, or cultural diversities, in terms of, just let's say, in Tamil Nadu itself, a Coimbatore will be very different from a Chennai, right? Uh, the place just next door, Tirupur, will be very different from a Coimbatore, right? And this is how diverse we are. Right from, although we do speak the same language, the way we speak it, or the way something means something else, is just so different. And I think it's just about understanding where the athlete is coming from. So what I usually do is that I take that minute to find out where they're coming from, what does it mean in their culture. And I do take a moment to sometimes explain to them also what it could mean generally or differently, right? Or maybe in a different culture as well. And because again, I think this is another conversation we were having about how uh, being cultural could also make it a little rigid sometimes. So sometimes, and I'm not saying that always, but making sure that rigidity does not exist in them. If a superstition works for them, then it's great, but if it doesn't work for them, then we need to break that rigidity, right? So that is the kind of work that we do, because again, this is all etched in the belief systems. It evokes emotions, that too very powerful ones, just like how, again, in India, uh, sweets is how we open up any conversation, right? Any celebration that happens, sweets is a must, right? Now, even if you are a person who does not like sweets, you would be forced to eat sweets, and that's just a belief issue which has come up to a behavior. And this is an easy thing to understand, but when it comes to religion and diversity or any kind of cultural things, there's a lot more sentiment involved in that. So it's just about making sure that rigidity does not exist, but just being open. That's the whole thing. Yes.
That is so beautiful. And one of the reasons why I actually picked the questions I did so far is to just demonstrate to our audience about how, within just tips of the iceberg, both of you are so, what the right word would be, in depth within your own areas, and each of you could have written like a series of books by yourselves. So my question here is, firstly, why co-author, and secondly, why an anthology? Why so many authors into it?
Shall I go first?
Sure.
I think I'd, I'd started a book some time back when I was finishing my PhD, but I would always go like, there's nothing new I have to say. And plus, I think when I started was to really get Indian sports psychs. I think people of the likes of Mugdami, Vaibhav were, you know, let's get Indian sports psychs there, right? And um, when you write, it's just one view, right? And if it had just been me and Keerthana writing, it would have been, there's also a kind of similar view that we look at. What we really wanted to get was the real nuances and richness which is there in our culture. And like you were rightly asking the previous question, there's diversity, and also psychology especially is about, for me, I always go, when I work with anyone, supervisees and younger ones were coming in, I'm like, what is your philosophy? It should not be my philosophy. It has to be uniquely yours, because that's what you're going to bring into the field. Just like how we say no athlete, I do not believe in this one size fits all at all. Your same athlete is going to be different at different points of time. So when we came together, we were like, and also to really look at, okay, there's so many of us here, and to give them a voice. Sometimes it's very nice for like maybe us to be seen, but I feel like there's a lot of work. What we do is really a lot of back end. I mean, COVID came, this came, that came, it put me in the forefront. That does not mean there's no one else who's doing work. And I think the richness that they brought, because we kind of offered like, what are the three areas that you're interested in? And I mean, it was so surprising and heartening to see the different areas which came. So I feel like if I had written, I think I'll let Keerthana speak for herself. If I had written, that would have been mine, which is okay, fine, a Dr. Chaitanya, etc. Maybe it'll come at some point of time. I feel this, what we brought, is really the voice of Indian sports psych, and I don't think it could have done in a better way than this collaborative project.
Absolutely. I think, when a person comes to India and says they want to buy a sari, right? You have different, first of all, different materials all over India, and you have different zaris, different concepts. And if you just have to pick one sari which is prevalent in each place, which is very authentic of each place, I think you're going to get a wardrobe full of saris which are very different, even if it's the same color, right? I think that's how sports psych is. Okay. um, it's so different, and like she said, one size does not fit the athlete, yes, but also I don't think every sports psych brings in the same thing. That's another thing altogether, because again, we have our own philosophies. I think, again, sports psych, rather psychology, is one field where our own philosophies are also, it really does impact what we bring. um, so again, I think, so again, like I mentioned, there's just going to be a lot of different things that comes up. um, so again, the reason we wanted to make this a collaborative effort is also because we wanted to hear many voices and make sure that they bring out what they think is special in them. And you know what? The best portion, when we asked the top three, none of them repeated the same thing. None of them knew that we had asked the other person, but there was not the same topic did not come again. Imagine three of each 20 people that we had emailed.
Wow. Wow.
Different, each of it different, right? Which means there's so much to write about and things that we would have never thought about, like perfectionism and all. I feel like we've taken it for granted so much that we never thought of that as a chapter, but Parina's actually wrote about that. The one which Vardhani has written, one is about supervision, but there's one with tribal athletes. And I think that's a beautiful chapter in itself, right? So these are things that I don't think we would have been able to bring out, or it would have never occurred to us that we have to bring out. So I feel like it's like the sari story. That is the, I think that is what it is.
And I loved how you said it's the voice of Indian psychology, sports psychology. It's just, I think that gave me goosebumps for a second there. And the challenge that I want to ask you guys about is, again, when you were talking about how each of you would have written from your voice, but here when you're editing so many voices put together, how did that challenge you? Like, how did you, you know?
I'm just going to start off with this. So, you know, we had a common, like, we had a mission and a vision for the book. And luckily, both of us were on the same page from the beginning. We knew why we wanted to write the book, and we knew what was the purpose of the book. We were very, very clear about it, okay? And it was a very, I don't think we had to speak about it overtly. I think it was just a given that we were on the same page. And we were lucky that we were on the same page, okay? Now, that made it extremely easy for us to put together the layers, the multiple layers that are there in the book. If you look at the book, there are 3 different layers, right? So once the chapters came in, it's not like we put the 3 headings together initially itself. So once the chapters came in, I think Doc was sitting and she was just going through everything, and then she put it as 3 different sections. One for the ecosystem, one for the performer, and one for the sports psych themselves, right? And it just turned out beautifully well. So I think it just came up, and I think having that common vision and mission purpose just helps, just like in a team sport, right? With cricket or football, I think when you have a common purpose and a vision, it's just a lot easier for the entire team to align. So I think that's how it was for us. And yeah, that's
I think she said most of it. And also one thing we were holding was, just to add to that one point, was just the way all the chapters came in was, you know, the 3 layers emerged. And it was so beautiful to actually, you know, because it's, you know, for those of us who write, it's like there's a dance happening when, you know, you see the chapters, you see the words, and it was like so exciting. And I remember writing it on paper first and sending it to Keerthana, and we were like, yeah, you know, it fits in, and then to put in what. And I think also, you know, the one thing we were holding was, this is not just a book for sports psychologists or just athletes or just you know, the management. We wanted to make it where anyone who picks up with sport and performance can get something. So I think the only thing was actually more than us as a challenge, it was sometimes streamlining this, because, you know, people are so passionate that we had to, oh sorry, we had to like literally go, can you have, you know, only so much of theory, then example, then this, where anyone picks up can follow. Like for example, Modit's chapter on culture, you know, how do you sustain high performing cultures, how do you build, I think that's a brilliant chapter, because people don't even know that. Oh, I've had people, with all due respect, coming, you know, when they say, oh, this athlete is so etc good, we see them, you know, clocking this time and all, and I kind of go, yeah, you know, but this, I don't see this one yet there mentally. And then okay, we discuss the case and all, and one of the things which comes even now is, so have you given them some strategies? I have to really hold myself and go, I'm the sports psych here. It's like, you know, Harini, if like I say, listen, I have this issue, you should do this to me. You know, it's very annoying. And I've had people like, you know, sometimes it's a joke as well. Like they're like, oh, you know, you're so loaded, oh you're on a holiday, I'll do your job. And I'm like, it's so we really wanted to bring that, no, we're not just talking, we're not just motivating, we're not just counseling. Also, psychology is just not theory. And I think, Samprita is also here. She did a brilliant job with editing, with also, we were like, bringing in the reflections of each chapter, right? That was also very important. Yeah.
Like, one thing that I have seen again myself, and we've discussed this so much, Keerthana and I, is about how people think sports psych is all about the pep talk.
Yeah.
It's
Thanks to
Actually, I just
whatever.
want to add. So another thing about, I mean, I think again, a lot of people think or they don't understand the meaning of what sports psychology actually is. So I think if anyone wants to know what sports psych is, they can pick up the book and they will definitely get the answer even from the uh, introduction.
Intro, yeah.
Because that's our first part. I think the first line states, "Are you a counselor?" That's how it starts, right? And yeah, I think it's just for us to. I think it gets so frustrating for us to hear, you counsel, you advise people, and I'm like, no, we don't advise people, right? So things like that, yeah, motivate, yeah, pep talk, energize them, like no.
Yeah. Just to add to that, and the shock that people get when, like I now flatly, not just now, everything even earlier, I want you to motivate my child. I'm like, sir, I'm sorry, I don't do motivation. And they're like, there's this utter shock. But it's motivation is a byproduct, right? It's there's so much more to it. And I think we really wanted to bring in the depth of what is sports psychology. And also, I think also for me, I somewhere feel like what life also asked of me was, one is of course the well-being of athletes in the sports system, and also my profession. I think for me to put out what really do sports psychologists do, like really, that was one of the core things. Yeah.
That's, yeah. And so, having said all of that, just coming to the conclusion of our podcast, I just have one question to both of you. If each of you had to pick one chapter that you're like, coaches or federations, please just read this and stop bothering us, which one would it be?
That's a tough
Thinking.
one.
So still thinking.
Yeah.
But I think molding the inner circle. I know it's my chapter, but that's not why I'm saying. But I think molding the inner circle, especially coaches and federations. So from that perspective, because I've written myself and Morel, both of us have written about why it's important for us to work with the sports scientists, why it's important for us to work with the coaches. I know coaches who get offended when we say coach education. Then how do we word it, right? So things like that, small things like that, it's not to take any offense. It's just about being mindful, being mental health. You need that literacy, right? And of course we are not going to know anything about SNC or anything that they are doing, but they need to be aware because they're going to work with them day in and all. So that is one chapter. Again, only because you said coaches and federations, I'm talking about this. I think Mudit's chapter on culture, high performing culture, I think that also would work. I think a lot of places are called HPCs, but are they really HPCs? Are they really functioning as high performance centers? I'm not sure about it. So that's another uh, thing I feel like people can read. Yes.
I would actually put Priyanka's and mine, the unconscious processes, mainly because I think psychology is seen so much as I can do it, the conscious, and we've seen the heartbreak. Like even if you just look at an athlete who's repeatedly getting injured, right? Like I have one who's Asian medalist in 2 years. It's and finally, I mean, this is a mature athlete, so we could get to what's the unconscious process, what's the narrative, what's the shift. And I feel um, not just Indian sports psych, but I think sports psychology in general really needs to understand that there's a lot happening. It's your iceberg. Psychology in itself is working a lot of the, you know, but here again, there's the conscious and unconscious. And then how do you bring that unconscious to conscious? So for me, I think that's where my Jungian depth psychology came. So whatever I bring in now is coming from there. I would definitely, put that. And then I feel the chapter on resilience in particular, where again it's like, oh, we're not mentally tough. Oh, you know, why aren't we getting medals? And all this, for lack of a better word, crap that keeps going around. I would definitely put those. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I had to, because you asked me, but if not, I think it's most all the chapters are really great.
And anyone should actually read the whole book. So,
Yes.
my concluding note to this is if you are an athlete, a coach, a part of a federation, an athlete parent, a sports scientist, or anyone within even the industry of sport, you just have to pick up Minds in Motion. It's available on Amazon. So, just read it and understand before you take any step forward. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
very
much.
much.